Should one good offensive game change everything about the Jets' offseason plans? Well, according to some members of the media and some Jets fans, the answer is yes. After Aaron Rodgers threw for over 300 yards against the Dolphins, some people are saying the Jets should bring him back if he finishes 2024 strong. It's a bad idea. Let's discuss why today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, December 10th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Big shout out to everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. On today's show, we're going to talk about three players from the Jets offense who should not be back with the team in 2025. All of these players have had long and productive careers in the NFL. One or two of them might be able to continue to be productive, but these are players who should not be part of the Jets' future. I'm going to begin by talking about the highest profile player on the team, Aaron Rodgers. And up until Sunday, it seemed like there was a general consensus that the Jets should move on from Aaron Rodgers. And then he goes out and plays what was probably his best game of the season against the Miami Dolphins. He throws for over 300 yards for the first time in just about 3 calendar years. And now all of a sudden, there's a little bit, maybe not a lot, but there's a little bit of chatter in the media and in the fan base about whether Aaron Rodgers' performance over the final 4 games should play a role in the team deciding whether he comes back or not. If Aaron Rodgers plays well over the final 4 games, is there a chance the Jets bring him back? And the answer to this is pretty obvious to me. It's no. And I think that this is an extreme overreaction to one good game. And I will tell you that I thought Aaron Rodgers played a very good game against the Dolphins, even though the Jets lost. It was probably his finest game as a New York Jets quarterback. Now, there really is not much competition for that title because Rodgers has not been all that good this year. But it was a good performance. It's one good performance, though. I think that sometimes in the NFL, the media and us fans, we become kind of prisoners of the moment where we only focus on the latest thing that's happened, and we kind of lose track of the big picture. Now, there's one common sentiment from people who suggest Rodgers could come back, and that's something to the effect of, I want Rodgers the player back, but I don't want Rodgers back as the general manager. I don't want the team building everything around Rodgers. But if he's just back as the quarterback, that's fine. I have a couple responses to that. The first is, there's no real reason I see that you should want Rodgers back as the quarterback because he really has just not been that good this year. Is Rodgers capable of playing a good game? Well, of course he is. We just saw that on Sunday. Is he capable of putting together a pretty good stretch? Well, of course he is. But so have a lot of quarterbacks who have failed with the Jets. Zach Wilson had some pretty good games as Jets quarterback. That didn't mean he was capable of doing it over the course of an entire season. If you look at Rodgers' numbers this year, well, he's outside the top 10 in passing yards and in passing yards per game. He's 20th in the league in passer rating. He's 25th in QBR, and he's 29th in yards per attempt. I mean, these are pretty important metrics. Now, I know he's the top 10 in touchdown passes, but touchdown passes is about the only stat where he's performing at a particularly high level. And just as important as his overall production, I think it's also important to look at a player's trajectory. Is he improving or is his production decreasing as he gets older? And that's especially true for a now 41-year-old quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. Once a quarterback gets into his 40s, you really have to be on the lookout for a decline. Well, what's Rodgers doing this year relative to the rest of his career? Well, he's on pace for the second lowest number of passing yards in his career. And to be clear, I'm not including the years where he was the backup in Green Bay. I'm not including 2023 where he only played 4 snaps. I'm only talking about years where he was the team's primary starter. So if you throw out the first 3 years of his career where he was Brett Favre's backup, you throw out last year where he only played 4 snaps, the years where he's been a starter, he's on pace to have his second lowest number of passing yards in his career. He's on pace to have his lowest quarterback rating of his career. He's on pace to have the second lowest QBR of his career, and he's on pace to have the lowest yards per attempt of his career. And by the way, I just said second lowest number of passing yards, second lowest QBR. Those are only ahead of 2022, the last full season he played. So you want to talk about downward trajectory. This is it. You're seeing, and you've seen this consistently through the major statistics. There has been a steady decline since 2020. And I know people can say, well, it was only 3 years ago he won the MVP. When you're that age, when you're at 40 years old, what you did 3 years ago ceases to matter. it does not make a difference because that's a really long time ago. At that age, decline tends to be rapid. And I mean, we can go through there are other things. He has the second lowest touchdown rate in his career right now. And while he's not an interception machine by any stretch of the imagination, while he's actually one of the few things he's doing well is doing a decent job of protecting the football, he is at his he is having his third highest interception rate of his career. So all of this points to a quarterback who is, first of all, not playing at a very high level. A quarterback who, it would be generous to say he's maybe the 20th best quarterback in the NFL this year. And that might be too high. I think probably closer to like the 24th, 25th best quarterback in the league. But taking it a step further, it's a quarterback who's showing a downward trajectory in his production. And an Aaron Rodgers who's entering his age 41, will turn 42 during 2025 season. That's not a quarterback you can expect to improve. It's a quarterback you can expect to get worse. And I know statistics aren't the end-all, be-all with quarterbacks, but if you've watched his play this year, I mean, you've seen that this is not a quarterback who's making anywhere near the level of impressive plays he did with Green Bay. And I know the next argument people will make will be, well, he finally got healthy. The Jets are after the bye. He was banged up early in the season. He kept appearing on the injury reports. I don't see that there's any reason to expect that to change going forward because as players age, it becomes tougher to deal with the day-to-day grind of the NFL. And yeah, look, I mean, maybe part of it's the Achilles is a little bit better. He was moving better in the Miami game than he had at previous points this season. Yeah, maybe he's off the injury report. Maybe the bye week did him some good. Well, a couple things. At 41, he's still not going to be able to move the way he did in Green Bay. And you still see that, even though he was moving better, he doesn't run with anywhere near the speed he did in Green Bay. He was a little bit more comfortable at moving outside the pocket when he saw something. He wasn't that great at evading defenders, though. He can step up, he can slide in the pocket, but when he actually has to go on a full-on sprint, I still don't think he can really outrun anybody. But beyond that, I think there's a reason he looked better early in the season than he did the deeper we got into the year. And I think there's a reason that maybe he's a little bit fresher after the bye than he looked in November. That's because, if he gets extra rest, he can still do some things. But he can't, the week after week grind, it wears on it. It's worn on him. And he's picked up bumps and bruises along the way. And I don't think this is just bad luck. I just think this is the body aging because you see this with a lot of older players who struggle to stay on the field. We saw that with Dwayne Brown, who was a model of consistency, Dwayne Brown was a guy with the Texans and with the Seahawks who barely ever missed a game. But he got to the Jets in his late 30s. He just couldn't stay on the field anymore because the body breaks down. The body wears down. So the idea, I just want Rodgers as the quarterback. I don't want to build the team around him. I don't know why you'd want Rodgers as the quarterback. He played a good game, but lots of guys play good games. Can he play a good season? I don't think so at this point. And I think this year's been the proof. I think a year older, adding another year on, that's not going to help anything. But even getting past that, I don't know what reason there is to believe that Rodgers would be okay just being kind of a side thought with this team. He's made it clear that he wants to be the centerpiece of this team. Do you think Aaron Rodgers is going to come back if the Jets cut Devante Adams and the Jets cut Allen Lazard and they install a new system he's never played in before? No. And he's even though he's been diplomatic speaking to the media about this, and even though he hasn't really tipped his hand, you've heard him say it depends on the situation here. It depends on who the coaching staff is. And he's spoken glowingly of Jeff Ulbrich. And we know Jeff Ulbrich's not going to get the head coaching job. Do you really think after everything that happened in Green Bay, after the way his career with the Packers ended, after the frustration he had with them drafting Jordan Love, that he's going to be fine playing like an Andy Dalton type of bridge quarterback role? I just find that tough to believe because no matter what he says, and he has not said he would accept a role like that, but no matter what he says, your actions in the past speak volumes. That's what really tells you how somebody's going to react to it. And Rodgers did not react to that in a positive way in Green Bay. So this is just not a player who should be part of the Jets' future. In fact, I think for the Jets to move forward as an organization, they need to turn the page on Aaron Rodgers. I don't really see any credible argument to bring him back. Okay, good game on Sunday. There's a difference between saying Rodgers played a good game and Rodgers should be back next year. Those are two very, very different thoughts. They're not the same thing. If Rodgers plays well the rest of the way, that's great for him. But this experiment has failed, and nothing will change that. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about another person who's here because of the Rodgers experiment. And unlike Rodgers, he's actually still playing at a high level, but this player should not be part of the Jets' future. It's a case of a good player who just doesn't make sense for this team. We'll talk about who that player is and why that is. We continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Ice Shaker. Hey, Locked On Jets fans. I know you're like me and the holiday shopping is, let's say, far from complete. All right, that's an understatement. I haven't even started yet. Don't tell my family. Family, if you're listening, just ignore that. If that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fan in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and Major League Baseball, and will make the ideal gift. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, Ice Shakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use code LOCKDOWNNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. They are kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that won't absorb odor like plastic bottles do. Patented twist and agitator that breaks up powders but is silent when you shake. Instead of the annoying ball, it's third-party tested. Will hold ice for 30-plus hours. Order your team-branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKDOWNNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers. Show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. Ice Shakers. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. Here's why you need to check it out. You can now win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKDOWNNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. Today we're talking about 3 players for the Jets on offense who should not be back with the team next season. And this is not always an indication of how productive the players are, because the player I'm about to talk about is actually still a pretty productive player, and that is Devante Adams. And of course, you remember the Jets traded for him 6 games into the season at 2-4. They absorbed a big contract, and Adams started off slowly. He's actually producing at a pretty good clip now. He's on pace. If you extrapolate his performance with the Jets and stretch it out over 17 games, he's at about an 1,100-yard pace at the wide receiver position, which is obviously quite good. And when you have a legitimate number 1 receiver in Garrett Wilson, that's a very good 1-2 punch. So you're probably sitting there saying, like, well, why would you break up the Adams-Wilson 1-2 punch? Well, there are a couple of reasons. And the number one reason, I think, is financially. It really does not make much sense for the Jets to bring Adams back next season if we're talking about dollars and cents, because if Adams is on the team next year, he counts for $38.3 million. If he's cut, the Jets only take on $8.3 million in dead money. I mean, $38.3 million. That's an exorbitant cap hit for a wide receiver. And while Devante Adams is still producing, again, at a pretty good rate, it's not like he's the top 3 receiver he was in Green Bay. Now, again, he's more than a solid receiver. He's pretty good, but $38.3 million, that would be the number 1 cap hit at the wide receiver position in the NFL next season. It would be the number 1 cap hit by about $3 million. And the CeeDee Lamb would have a $35.4 million cap hit next year. DK Metcalf would be at 31.8. Tyler Lockett would be 30.9. Those are the only 4 receivers in the NFL who are set to have a $30 million cap hit next year. And Adams doesn't have a $30 million cap hit. He has a $38 million cap hit. It's just too much money for a wide receiver. And the other aspect of this is that the Jets just don't have a lot of salary cap space heading into 2025. Over the cap projects them at about $34 million heading into the offseason. Now, that could be off by a couple million, give or take, either way. But that's not a lot of money. $34 million is not a lot of money when you need a quarterback. And you got to figure out the right tackle position. And you need at least 1 receiver, and you got to look to the defensive side of the ball. You need at least 1 defensive end. You'll need 1 defensive tackle. You got to figure out the linebacker position. You don't really have anything at safety. That money doesn't go very far. And Adams is really the only player who the Jets can create big cap space with a cut. Allen Lazard saves about $6 million, and then there's really nobody else who would save you even $3 million by cutting them. It's just too much money for Adams, who, again, he's playing at a high level, but not as high as he used to. And the bigger issue is just he doesn't really fit the team. He's a good player who doesn't make sense for this particular team. Now, you might say, well, why not reduce Adams' salary? Well, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network gave a report over the weekend that tells you that that's just probably not going to happen. In fact, Rappaport stated that, this is a report he has, at the time the Jets made the trade for Devante Adams, Adams' agent was insistent that the Jets not touch that contract. And why was he insistent? Because Adams and his agent know that the Jets cannot bring him back at $38 million next year. So Adams now has all the leverage. Because if he doesn't want to come back, you just say, I'm not going to renegotiate my salary. If Aaron Rodgers is not back, I think we can make an educated guess that Adams is not going to want to return. So just another, this trade was, I think part of the problem with this trade the Jets made is that Adams is producing at an 1,100-yard pace, and it's still a terrible trade because he's not helping the team win. He's about to turn 32. I mean, there's really no way that this guy, he's producing stats. He's producing pretty well, but there's no way he's going to help the Jets win during his tenure with the team. And we know next season probably going to be a lean year for the Jets. It's probably going to be a reset year. The Jets are going to need to get their cap situation unclogged, which means it's not going to be a season where the Jets are going to be looking to win big. So why would Adams do the Jets a favor at that point? He just tell the Jets, cut me, and I'll go sign with somebody else. I'll go play for a contender. This was not a well-handled situation by the Jets, to say the least. Adams could be helping a contender right now. Instead, the Jets traded for him at 2 and 4. They gave him a third-round pick, and they absorbed a bad contract, and then gave Adams all the leverage because Adams wouldn't let them touch the contract. Really, really unbelievable negotiating by Woody Johnson. Now, you watch Adams on the field, you see a guy who still runs routes well, a guy who's still pretty dangerous after the catch, a guy who can still threaten the defense, a guy who's an excellent 1-2 punch with Garrett Wilson. At another point in Adams' career, he'd be a great guy for this team to have. If the Jets were at a different stage in their team build, he'd be a really good guy for the team to have. It's just he's not at the point of his career where he can help this team, because if you bring him back next year, this is his age 32, 33 season, and it's kind of a reset year. And then you bring him back the next year, he's in his age 33, 34 season. You've already seen some signs of decline for Devante Adams. Now, he was starting at such a high point that even in his decline, he's still better than a lot of receivers in the NFL. This is just not a fit. It's not about the player. It's not about his quality, because the quality, again, is pretty high. I think that this is probably the high end of what I was expecting from Devante Adams. It's just sometimes a good player is the wrong fit for your team. And this was the case when the Jets got Adams. I mean, I'm sure there will be articles written about this for years to come, about the Jets deciding at 2 and 4 that they were thinking that they were one wide receiver away from going to the Super Bowl. It really is just an unbelievable move in retrospect, and even in the moments. I mean, go back to you go watch or listen to one of the shows that I did after the trade for Adams. What did I say? I said, does this help the Jets passing game? Sure. Does it make the Jets a Super Bowl team? Of course not. Is the trade worth it? Well, if it doesn't make the Jets a Super Bowl team, it really wasn't. It's a tough thing because, like, there were other points where it would have been great to have Adams. The Jets just got him at the wrong point of his career. The trade was timed very poorly, and the Jets gave Adams all the leverage. The Jets essentially put themselves to pay a maximum price to get Adams and left themselves with very little leverage to deal with the guy. It's just a masterclass in poor negotiation. If you could get Adams back at, I don't know, like under $20 million, he'd certainly, he'd probably be worth the gamble for, even if he had them for multiple seasons. But Adams is in the driver's seat right now. He doesn't have to renegotiate with the Jets. He can hit the open market and go get a new deal with a contender. And that's the way the Jets handled it. That's how the Jets put themselves behind the 8 ball in this one. And I think there's just a lot of factors that line up to make Adams continuing to be with the Jets a no-go. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to one more player. We've talked about the quarterback. We've talked about the wide receiver. Now we're going to turn our attention to the offensive line. The guy who's having a pretty good season, like Adams, is about to hit free agency, and he's a popular player. He's kind of a lunch pail player, but I don't know if he's the right guy to bring back for the Jets in 2025, and I'll explain why as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On. Episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Jets on the road in Jacksonville this weekend, and they're favored. And look, I know the Jaguars are very good. I know that the Jaguars are playing their backup quarterback. It boggles my mind, though, that the Jets are favored in a game at this point. I mean, this team it's so bad. I don't think they should be favored over anybody. But obviously, FanDuel sees it differently. So you want to get in on the action, you get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That's at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. We're talking about players the Jets should move on from in 2025. And I feel like this show is going to be pretty controversial because I know there's still, despite everything that's happened this year, there's still a pretty vocal Rodgers fan base within Jets fandom. I know there's a lot of people that want Devante Adams back, but I just don't think he makes sense. This might be the most controversial one because this is a player who, by all accounts, has been a true professional in both of his stints with the New York Jets and a true professional ever since he first set foot on an NFL field, and that is Morgan Moses. And I want to make it clear, I have a lot of admiration and respect for Morgan Moses. This is the kind of guy a winning team needs. A guy who's just a lunch pail type guy, does his job quietly, does his job professionally, almost never misses a snap, plays through injuries. In fact, Sunday, he suffered an injury pregame warm-ups and still tried to gut it out. He did have to leave the game in the second half, but he did his best. In a lost season and a meaningless game against an opponent that was under 500, Morgan Moses still tried to give it a go. I mean, you want to talk about the type of guy you need on a football team, Morgan Moses is it. I always say that a great offensive line isn't built around 5 all-pro players. You need maybe 1 or 2 all-pro players, but you just need guys who do their job professionally, and guys who work well with the players next to them, guys who work to develop chemistry with them, guys who perfect their craft, and guys who play through pain. And that's what Morgan Moses is. So when I say I don't think the Jets should bring back Morgan Moses in 2025, I want to make it clear that this is not about anything to do. This has nothing to do with the kind of career Morgan Moses has had. It's not about the type of player he is. It's not about the type of person he is. It's not about the type of locker room influence he is, because these are all exemplary things. And I've been pretty clear that in retrospect, and I should have been more vocal at the time, I was not. So there's only so much I could say about this. In retrospect, letting Morgan Moses go after the 2021 season was a pretty big mistake by the Jets, because this was the type of professional force they needed on their offensive line. They missed him those 2 years he wasn't here. And that's probably part of the reason they traded to get him back after the 2023 season. Here's the issue with Morgan Moses. It's not about what he's done in the past. It's about the trajectory of his career and where he's going in the future. And that concerns me because, first of all, I think he's had a good season. I think that the Jets made a good deal getting him back. I think he solidified the right tackle position. And we know that over the last couple of years, the tackle spot's been a mess for the Jets, in part because guys haven't been able to stay on the field. And that's not to disparage anybody else out there. Injuries happen. But Moses is a guy who, stepped in and has played at a pretty high level, but it's not quite as good as it used to be. You see some slippage in pass protection. You see some slippage in the run game. But more to the point, well, Moses only missed 2 games this year, and while he's played through a lot, including that injury he suffered in pregame warmups, and I want to emphasize, this is a guy who's giving effort. You get injured in pregame. This Jets team has given you, if you're a starter, this Jets team has given you every reason to check out on the season. In fact, this guy got injured in pregame warmups. It was playing with his hand wrapped up. He's still out there gutting it out. It says a lot about the football character of Morgan Moses. But last year, for the first time since his rookie season, he missed games. And again, you hear what people said around Baltimore when he was with the Ravens last year. The doctor, some of their doctors, some of their trainers have said any other player, he would have been out the season. He only missed a couple of games with us. And this year, Moses suffered an injury against New England week 3, missed 2 games, has been back out there, has been playing through some stuff this year. But it concerns me because, you're starting to see signs that the body might be deteriorating. Again, going back to what we said earlier, that the grind of the NFL season, the hits start adding up. The body doesn't recover as quickly. And it hasn't prevented Moses from being on the field this year. But you see the trajectory going in the wrong direction. And again, I go back to Dwayne Brown, who was a guy who was always on the field when he was with the Seahawks, and a guy who was always on the field when he was with the Texans. But a guy who, you could see in 2022 the signs that his body was beginning to deteriorate a bit. And I remember in that 2022 season, that was Brown's first season with the Jets, thinking the Jets probably got the last good football they were going to get out of him. I felt like it was a mistake bringing him back in 2023. And it proved to be, because those things that, were those hits that added up in 2022, with a year of more age on the body, he just wasn't able to bounce back as quickly. And I understand Morgan Moses and Dwayne Brown are 2 different players. I understand that just because Dwayne Brown's career went one way doesn't necessarily mean Morgan Moses' career is going to go the same way. But I can't help but think of that as an example where you had a guy who was a monument to durability. And then he started, having some bumps and bruises along the way. And maybe they didn't turn him into a bad player, but you saw the productivity go down. And even though they didn't keep him on the field, you saw that this guy's body is not responding the way it used to the grind of an NFL season. And I think you want to move on from a player before it reaches a crisis point. You want to cut ties with a player the year before his production really starts to fall off a cliff. And you're seeing that those subtle signs of decline, those subtle signs of deterioration with Morgan Moses. I think maybe at the start of the 2024 season, he had one more year in the NFL left in him. I don't know that he has a second year left in him. Now, easy to say. Who do the Jets get to replace him at right tackle? It's not really clear. There aren't really that many great options available at the right tackle position this offseason. So it will be a bit of a challenge. But I don't know that bringing back, and this is painful to say because you can just hear it when I talk about him, the admiration I have for this player. I really think very highly of Morgan Moses. I wish he had been with the Jets for a longer portion of his career because this is the type of guy the Jets have really needed. And I think the Jets really missed him after he left for Baltimore after 2021. But you can't undo that. You can't turn back the clock. The NFL just keeps moving forward. And I think that Morgan Moses is probably, at the end of the line. And I think that this is the type of player that, and sometimes the Jets struggle with this. Sometimes the Jets struggle with cutting the player on time. Sometimes the Jets frequently wait a year too long to move on from players. And I think if Moses is brought back, it pains me to say it, this could be another example because the signs are all there that he probably doesn't have that much longer in the NFL. He's had a long and excellent career. He's 33 years old though. And, the old expression, father time in the NFL is undefeated. I think this could be another example. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button so that where you're watching and listening so you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show or listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody. Send in your mailbag questions tomorrow. We'll try and do our weekly mailbag show. Talk to you then.